Hello, I hope this video finds you well. Tonight we're going to look at last2 in the warm-up 2 section, and we're looking at the Java implementation. Now this is a really great problem, but it does start to get a little bit more complicated if you're really just learning how to program, because it requires you to count the number of times that a substring appears in a larger string. And it's really helpful if you can learn how to do this using loops. And you'll see in the description I've attached a link to a video I made that goes through this in a bit more detail. So what the problem is stating is, given a string, return the count of the number of times that a substring length2 appears in the string and also as the last two chars of the string. So hi, xxx, hi, yields 1, and it won't count the end substring. So essentially what this problem is saying is, take the last two characters and then figure out how many times that shows up inside the string. So hi, we see it there once, in this case xx, and we see it appear once, in this case xx, and we see it appears once, twice. That's the kind of trickier case. So to do this problem, I'm going to show you a correct way to do it, and then I'm going to show you an incorrect way to do it. And the reason why the incorrect way is really neat is because it highlights an interesting technique that you should know why it fails. But our first way is we're going to use this good old, we're going to use a loop to count the number of times the string appears. But the first thing I have to do is I have to pull out the last two characters in order to compare. So I'm just going to make a string called cstr for compare string, and that's going to be str.substring. And in this case, if I want the last two characters, I want 4 to 6. But of course I want to generalize this, so how does 4 relate to the length of this string? Well, it's going to be the length minus 2. So I can say str.length minus 2. Remember that the substring method in Java is overloaded, so if you just pass it a single parameter, it goes from that index to the end. Some people might do this, and that's fine as well. Now, if I just put a return 0 here for now so I can run it and I hit go, you'll see, well, it's obviously wrong, but I want to draw your attention to this. And this is for those of you that are doing Python and Java. In Python, this wouldn't be a problem because Python, like I said, is really forgiving. Java, not so much. If you try and access indexes that don't exist, it gives you an index out of bounds error. So if you have a length of 1 or a length of 0, it's not going to run. So here's what I do. I'm going to put an if statement at the start, and I'm going to say if str.length is less than 2, and I'm just going to return 0, because I don't need to do anything else. And since I've returned, I've exited the method, and this will no longer crash the program. And if I hit go, it now runs, and I get the cases where it's 0 correct, but really it's only these two that are really correct, properly correct. These ones just by fluke. So then I can pull out those two letters, and now I need to compare how many times does cstr appear in the string. And this is where I talk about that idea of reading frames. There are ways to do this without using this technique. You can use a built-in method called count instance or something like that. There's lots of them out there, but I really think it's important as a developing programmer to know how to use this loop in this way. So if we think of it like this, we want to compare hi, and what I essentially want to do this is I want to take hi and compare it to the first two letters, then to the second two, third two, fourth two, but I don't want to compare it to the last two, because again, I don't want to include that in my count. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just have a think here. Well, if I want to compare hi to the first two, what am I saying? Well, I'm saying is hi equivalent to str.substring, and that's going to be 0, 2. Because what I'm going to do is I want to grab these two characters. Remember, inclusive, exclusive. And then I'm going to move it along. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to paste it a couple times. So now I'm going to say, well, okay, it was hi equivalent to str 3. Then I'm going to move it along. And now we see it's going to be str is 2, 4. And notice the difference between the second parameter and the first parameter is always 2. And that's because we want to pull out a substring of length 2. That's always our nice little check we do with this. If I get this paste correct. And now I'm going to move it along, and I'm going to say, well, 3, 5. And this is where I can stop. because even though there are lots of cases where eventually I do this, but in this case I don't want to compare the last two. And so now I'm going to look for a pattern and try and set up a loop. But I need something to count the number of times it shows up. So I'm going to make an int called CTR and set it to 0. And if I look, I see it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. And I say, okay, how does 3 relate to the length? Well, the length in this case is 6. And I can see that 3, if I want to go, basically want to make sure that I is always going to be less than 4. So what am I going to do? I'm going to say 4, int I equals 0, because that's where I'm going to start. So I is less than, let's just say for now, I is less than 4. I is equal to I plus 1. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an if statement here. And I'm going to say, all right, if str.substring at I, comma, I plus 2, dot equals, remember in Java I have to use the dot equals method. And I'm going to say, is that equal to cstr? Well, if it's equal, then what I'm going to say is ctr equals ctr plus 1. And then I return ctr outside the loop. And I hit go, and I see it works in a bunch of cases, but I also get this funny index out of bounds error. Well, the reason I'm getting the index out of bounds is because this length 4 is specific to a string of length 6. So what I have to do is now generalize this. And how does 4 and 6 relate? Well, it's going to be str.length minus 2. And I hit go, and there it is. There's no doubt that this is a tricky problem. And often when students start doing Codingbat, they'll go through warm-up 1 and find a lot of success, and then they'll hit warm-up 2 and they start to hit these loops. My recommendation is, if you're in that situation, go back and do arrays 1 or lists 1 and strings 1, because that involves no loops. And to get a better understanding of this reading frame idea, take a look at the video I've linked. Oh yeah, I just remembered I was going to show you one more approach. Let me do that. Okay. This isn't going to work. I'm going to tell you right now. But it is a really cool technique. And what it is this idea of collapsing a string. And we can collapse, I call it collapse. Oh. We can collapse a string simply by replace any characters /substring by an empty string. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to make a new string and I can call it new str. And it's going to be, first thing I need is I need this stuff up here. So let me comment this out. Wrong language. There we go. So just like there was before, I'm going to get that substring out to compare it. And I'm going to say str.replace all, and I'm going to replace all cstrs with an empty string. And then what I can do is, so what's going to happen is if I have this string here, say, take that, let's go down here and paste that. What's going to happen is if I replace all the highs here, this string is going to become XX, which is length 0, 1. Now, I could return the length of, I'll have to return a CTR. So how do I figure out how many highs have been replaced? Well, we can look. This has a length of 6, and this has a length of 4. And I can see that what that means is I've replaced length of 2. Where am I? I've replaced 4 characters. But if the word that I'm replacing is of length 2, that means to find the number of words I've replaced is going to be 6 minus 2 divided by 2. And that's going to give me the number of words that I've replaced. So I can say return the length of the original thing, so str.length minus new str.length. And we have to put all of this in brackets, otherwise we get this problem of order of operations, divide by 2. And remember, I don't want to count that last string, so I'm going to minus 1. And I can hit go. Oh, I forgot a semicolon. I'm going to hit go. And look at that, it works in almost all the cases. Now, so what's happening is essentially I'm replacing all of the highs with an empty string, collapsing it. And the reason I have to minus 1 here, because I don't want to count this last high. So the question is, why doesn't it always work? Well, it doesn't always work because in this case we look, because XXX counts as 2, it kind of doesn't work. It doesn't work. But I really like this idea of replacing a string with an empty string to collapse it. It's a really powerful technique, and I do recommend that you take a look at the problems in string 2. For example, the cat-dog problem. It's a great problem because you can collapse the string to count the number of times cat appears or dog appears. But you have to be cautious. Anyways, this has been a long video. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.